Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be talking about the Scorpio lunar eclipse, which occurs on the 16th of May in all the major cities of the world, apart from LA, which is the 15th. Now, to understand exactly what time this occurs for you, please see the screen now. Now, what I'm going to do is explain first of all what I feel the Scorpio lunar eclipse is about. The impact is over the next 6 months. I'm then going to share with you the technical event chart based on Universal Central Time, which has an ascendant in Taurus, which actually links up brilliantly well with the Sun, the North Node in Taurus, but also with Pluto. So a very enabling influence. But also in that event, we have Saturn in a very disruptive and limiting angle to the Scorpio lunar eclipse. And because of the 6-month, half-year impact of this event, that's something that we really need to look at closely. I'm then going to share a more simple wheel of how this event occurs in terms of the overall zodiac, because obviously the sign of Scorpio is house 8, and that's where the moon is, very close to the part of fortune actually, which is interesting. But where the sun is, in terms of that overall chart, is in house 2. So I'm going to explain that to you if you're interested in astrology is more emerging. And finally, please stay with me. I will then go on to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect over this next half year. And you can watch these in terms of your ascendant or the sun. The choice is entirely yours. Now, if you would like to grapple with and engage with more serious astrology in a really meaningful way, if you do give me 3 pieces of personal information, your time, date and place of birth, I can give you a roadmap that can guide the rest of your life in terms of your character analysis. But if you get my special package of a 12-month forecast as well, this has 30% off. This will also help you to negotiate the pitfalls that could come up for you over the next year. But equally, it can give you the timings of when to make very shrewd moves to your advantage. So please see the link beneath this video for that information. Also, if you would be so kind to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured. Getting nearer to that 100,000 mark. Had all those health issues over the last 10 years or so would be very grateful if you would click or tap on the bell notification symbol. And finally, if you love your zodiac forecast, you can get your free daily written one by seeing the link beneath this video where you can subscribe, and it gets fired to your device at no cost to you at all each and every morning. So let's think about that Scorpio flower lunar eclipse. So Scorpio is the sign of transformation. It can be where we're very invested. It can be where our commitment is very strong, where we're really putting the tentacles down in terms of how we invest in a relationship, a business interest, the type of lifestyle we live. It can be because Scorpio is a fixed sign, very much to do with a degree of stability. But the thing with Scorpio energy is that when things need to make way, they can actually make way quite quickly. And that can be a surprise, especially if you have been involved with someone who's a Scorpio and suddenly they feel they want to move on. They can make those moves in a very dramatic way. So it can be a position of great depth and investment and enduring energies, but it also can be one of endings. And of course, it's a very psychological sign, very much to do with intensity, can be very much linked to sex, but also longer term finance, things like investments, savings, pensions. We're all thinking very much at the moment about the cost of living. And I think that this particular event is really asking us to think very, very carefully about our consumption of resources in general. So it kind of follows on from the Taurus solar eclipse new moon, the black moon, which occurred on the last day of last month, and for most of the world, and it's feeding into that as well. So that was very much about how we can be enterprising, because Mars forged such a great link to the position of the Sun very close to Uranus in Taurus and the Moon. Whereas now we're really being asked to balance that with what our everyday attitudes and responses are. Very Taurus, our need for security and foundations, Taurus. Everyday money, our self-worth, all these things are Taurus. And now the moon comes around to face the Sun, which is very close, as I said before, to the North Node, which can be very good. And really we're being asked to find that balance between the ins and the outgoings. But the ins and the outgoings can be around our involvement with others. You know, if we're in a relationship with a colleague, a friend, where we feel that we do a bit more than we get back, or there's some kind of leverage or possessiveness or power games that go on, very Scorpio energies. These are the type of things that we're going to want to look at over the next 6 months. But I think because of the cost of living crisis, which I did sadly predict right back in the autumn of last year in terms of the Northern Hemisphere, that has proven to be right. You know, the cost of interest rates, the cost of raw commodities, and the big one for a lot of people is the cost of energy and heating and light. And these are all scary changes. So I think that this particular lunar eclipse is more of that restructuring about how we consume resources in general, a whole attitude to that. In terms of personal relationships, Scorpio can be that place where we get very close and committed, or it can be where we decide to leave. And again, because Taurus itself is a fixed sign, there is a kind of, if you like, a resistance coming between them, because neither really ideally wants to blink first. They would both prefer to keep the status quo, but then we can cling on to things that are not really good for us. And ironically, as I share on the screen now the event chart, you can see that Saturn, the planet of structure, the ruler of the sign of Capricorn and the co-ruler of the sign of Aquarius, that's absolutely in a T-square between the moon and the Sun. And I think that gives us some idea of what we're up against, because Saturn in the sign of Aquarius is very much about how structures affect us all. But in this particular event chart, based on Universal Central Time, you can also see that Saturn is in the 11th house, very much to do with society as a whole, person kind. The midpoint between the Sun and the Moon is right beside Saturn as well. So, you know, we're all very closely interacted with one another, and, you know, the decisions that are going to be made and the decisions that we make personally are all going to be very universal, I feel. But you can see in that particular chart that Mars and Neptune are actually in an alliance in the 11th house, but they are in the sign of Pisces. Neptune, of course, is at home. Mars is a guest. It's transiting through this situation. Mars conjoining with Neptune can create a degree of desire that's not necessarily very clear-headed. And sometimes when people have Mars and Neptune influences in their natal charts, they could be tempted to be dishonest or to indulge in escapism to a very great degree. But in this particular chart, both Mars and Neptune are actually forging very positive angles to both the Sun and the Moon. So that's helpful. Jupiter, you can see, the ruler of Sagittarius and Pisces, is now in the sign of Aries. It's going to come back into Pisces later this year after the 4-month retrograde, but it's in the 12th house. That's where Chiron is as well. Chiron is conjunct Venus in the 12th house. Chiron's a comet, Venus is detrimented in Aries. So what we're being asked here in the 12th house is to really dig deep to find our sense of purpose, our philosophies, our spiritual journey, to try to clarify that in a way that's helpful to us. And that could see some reflection. But the North Node is very close to the Sun, and you can see the Sun is right on the first house cusp. It's just in the 12th, but it's so very close. It's only around about 15 minutes or so away from being exactly conjunct the ascendant in Taurus. So on the other side of the heavens, you can see that we've got the path of fortune very close to the moon. So if we relate to people, the path of fortune is in the 7th house in a way which is good for us all. So it's not about only getting what we need, it's about trying to work situations out so we all get a little bit of what we want. And finally, Mercury, the planet of communication, in its home zone of Gemini, one of its two home zones, and just there in the first house, suggesting fresh thinking can be helpful to where we are. But the sector of humanity, the 11th house, is really going to be important to this process. And yet we got Pluto right up there at the top of the chart in the 10th house, very much to do with world leaders, I would say. And that actually is in a brilliant enabling link with the node, the Sun, the ascendant, the path of fortune, and the moon. So some big structural changes are possible, but I think when it comes to finance, we are in for a long haul in terms of trying to drive down our expenditure by changing our lifestyles. I read that a lot of people are cancelling their subscriptions to many streaming giants because they're considering that it's not a priority. Nothing's as much as a priority as eating and heating the home, is it? So people will be making hard decisions like that. Now, in terms of the overall zodiac, I'm showing on the screen now the wheel, which shows that we have in the sign of Taurus, house 2, we have the Sun, the node, the North Node, and Uranus. We have Mercury in house 3. We have Jupiter, Chiron, and Venus in house 1, Aries. And then Mars, Neptune, and Juno, the asteroid of relating, in sector 12, the sign of Pisces, Saturn in Aquarius, Pluto in Capricorn 10. So you can see that in this particular chart, because it's equal house, some of the planets, in the case of Saturn and Pluto, move into the sectors they are in terms of the technical chart, but it's not true of all the planets, because in the technical chart we have the position of the Sun in house 12, very much to do with the psychology, the emotional side of life, whereas the moon is in the practical house 6, very Virgoan. And in this particular chart, it would be in this more simple chart, house 8. So how do we make sense of this? Well, in terms of the overall zodiac, it is, as I said before, that Taurus is very much about our foundations, our self-worth, money, can be about the things we really enjoy, because it's Venusian ruled, and Uranus there is pushing us to be innovative in our approach to how we use resources, but it's also creating some shockwaves that we're finding difficult, because obviously if you have a big war, and where that big war is happening happens to be a massive area of agricultural production for wheat, then that's going to make the price of wheat go up. If the economies of the world are trying to source fuel from different places for political reasons, that's going to likely impact on the price of petrol, the price of gas to heat our homes. So a lot of these things are leveraged by the big politics, and that's why Pluto is so important. But it also shows Saturn, which can be restrictive, telling us that in house 11, our future plans based around our resources are going to need a lot more care. So we might need to go back to a bit more old-fashioned thriftiness, which a lot of people will find very difficult to embrace. Other people will say, hey, what's new? That's been my life for a long time. Welcome to the club. But for a lot of us, if we can sort of make the most of our of our money in a very careful way. So it's not really about what we spend, it's more about the value that we get from it. So that's the type of themes that are going to be developing over this next 6 months. But in a romantic relationship, I think if there is that sense of things being stuck, possessiveness, jealousy, those scorpionic energies, some hidden stuff could come up, of course, with Scorpio. Some resentments that have been simmering beneath the surface could explode into the open over the next half year. And because Saturn's in Aquarius, it's pushing us really to be better people and not be so possessive. But, you know, human nature as it is means that we can see the best and the worst of people in what's going on in the world at the current time. Now, I hope that has presented you with some insights in what to expect. Please stay with me for your forecast for each of the 12 signs, beginning with Aries. Well, for you, Aries, having Jupiter in your sign, just, and Venus, the two planets of fortune, is a really nice situation. But Chiron's very close to that Venus. If you've got a wound in terms of your self-worth, Chiron next to Venus suggests that someone could relate to you over the next 6 months who can be of great help to you. This could be a counsellor, it could be just a friend who's very caring. Maybe you're going to gain insights into the way you are around relationships. Because of the second, 8th house energy of this particular event, for you that can be quite sexual. And with Venus and Jupiter in your own sign, do expect, if you're single, to get plenty of attention over this next half year. So the question you'll need to ask yourself, is the person I'm drawn to worthy of you? Not in a snobby way, but the lessons you've learned from past relationships, you'll be keen not to make those mistakes again. So you'll be protective. In a business context, obviously you're not going to want to give away your ideas if someone else is going to pinch them, when perhaps you could profit from them better yourself. So you're needing to think about how you can use the individuality of Jupiter and Venus in your sign in a way which gives you a return. Now, Saturn's in your sector of friendship, Pluto in your sector of desire for recognition and success. And because the position of the Sun and the lunar eclipse generally feed in very well to Pluto, if you play your astral cards right, you could actually end up at the end of this 6-month period being better off than you may fear at the time of watching this broadcast. Now, Taurus, for you, it's all about your determination recently to focus on what's important to you as an individual. For sure, Mars, Neptune, and Juno are in your sector of friendship, which is lovely, but I think that there's been a big plan that's really been important to you, but this moon could flag up someone who feels that you've been so preoccupied with what you need to do for yourself that you've taken your eye off their needs. This could be a sibling, it could be a friend, it could be a another family member, an older family member, or it could be a partner. But there are some times in life when we have to really focus on what's important to us. But with Jupiter and Venus, your ruler, tucked away in your 12th house in Aries, I wouldn't take any relationship too much for granted. Venus in the 12th house may be making you nostalgic for someone from your past. Perhaps you're wanting to perhaps even check out if you could get in contact with them. But if you do, just carefully analyse what happened the first time round, because if both of you haven't really completely learnt the lessons from what happened before, then conflict could be repeated once more. So if you are single, I think Jupiter and Venus in your 12th house suggest that somebody may be quite taken with you, and they may not necessarily be telling you outright. So watch out for those non-verbal signals. You know, sort of someone twiddling their hair, or you look up and look round and look at them and they suddenly look away, or someone flushes up when they see you, or always seems to sort of be at the water tower when you go to get yours. That type of thing will give you some hints on who might be interested in you. But I do think a mysterious admirer could be in the astral works, particularly with Mars and Neptune conjunct in your 11th house. So it could be that somebody that you know, or a friend of a friend, is the person who's holding a little bit of a thing for you, even if they're not necessarily revealing their hand at this current time. Now, Gemini, having Mercury in your sign is fab, but having the Sun, Node and Uranus in your 12th house is asking you to think about the more psychological side of life, whereas you might be quite focused on the practical side, which is where the Moon is in the sign of Scorpio for you. And yet with Jupiter and Venus in your sector of the future and your connections to others, your charisma can really burn bright. Also, Mars conjunct Neptune in your 10th house of work suggests that if your work is involved in anything that might be remotely to do with compassion, caring, healing, health, psychology, guidance, life coaching, tarot reader, whatever, then this is going to be an important time for you. Pluto's pushing you to do better financially, but Saturn wants you to work in a way which is really truthful for who you are. Maybe what will be revealed over the next 6 months is a need to get more and more in touch with the parts of your nature that are less the prism of your mind and your intellect and more to do with how you feel about things. You know, whether it's your spiritual beliefs, whether it's anything to do with healing. These things can be something that really grab your attention a lot, and if you are prepared to embrace them, they can come into your world in an even stronger way. But it's just toggling between that need for spiritual peace, quiet and tranquility with making it all work in a practical way and looking after your physical well-being by being organised, you know, virtuous about what you eat and drink and the amount of exercise you get. So there's a bit of a toggle going on with that for you. Now, Cancer, the sign of Taurus for you is house 11, which is about your future, it's about your friendships, it's about where you thrive in terms of your interactions with others. Now, having Jupiter and Venus in the sign of Aries is house 10, which is how you're grabbing attention in the wider world. And Mars and Neptune and Juno being in your 9th house is to do with exploration, travel. Saturn's in your sector of the money, Pluto in your sector of relating. So the Moon for you is in house 5, joys, pleasures, socializing, and the Sun in the sector of the collective. So balancing what you want to do as an individual, the Moon, with what works for your connections to others, the Sun, is the trick on this particular lunation lasting the next 6 months. One of the things that can happen with an 11th, 5th house axis is the need to manage time more carefully. So my wife was telling me recently that most of us can't really manage more than 5 or 10 really quite close relationships because we just don't have time. So that might be something that, you know, you could be thinking about. If you're someone who's led a more sheltered or sort of a more withdrawn lifestyle, perhaps because of COVID, perhaps because of, you know, the way your planets are progressing in terms of your nativity, I think you're going to have an opportunity here actually to get much more together with others. And even if it was through work, Jupiter and Venus can make you very lucky around your work or your life role or the amount of recognition you're going to get. But I think you're wanting to be creative, you're wanting to be yourself, but you still need to fit in with the gang. And it's just toggling those two areas that's going to be important over the next half year. Which brings us to Leo. Now, the position of the eclipse is in your 4th house of home, emotion, and family. So the position of the Sun is in work, wealth, standing, status, property, all that good stuff. But Saturn, of course, is in your opposite sign of Aquarius, forging a T-square. So whether it's work or whether it's home, your relationships are going to be very important to your progress or the lack of it over the next half year. Now, because Jupiter and Venus are in your 9th house, your desire to experiment and do different things, be a free spirit is going to be very strong. Mercury in your 11th house is great, so there's going to be lots of opportunities to chat to other people. But if there's too much emphasis on your career and life standing and earnings, and not enough on your support structures, and this starts to affect your relationships, Saturn's going to pull you up pretty quickly. So you're going to need to watch that, I feel, but there are still opportunities. Virgo, now your ruler Mercury is located in house 10, work, but Uranus, the node, the sun, in house 9, being more daring, adventurous, breaking free. But the moon's in the 3rd house. Your ideas might not gel with someone else quite as well as you'd like over the next 6 months, particularly if you are wanting to be much more open-minded. You know, COVID has had a really negative impact on us in so many different ways, and if you're really wanting to get off the beaten track and do something that is much more spontaneous, or you're wanting to follow some new philosophies, if a partner's not happy about that, then that could be the point of difference between you. And because Saturn's in the 6th house of your situation, it can be quite sharp, the exchanges. So battles of ideas and wills are possible over the next 6 months. Your financial position, I think, can actually improve. And there could be someone, if you're single, who could come into your world who actually really captures your imagination. Mars is to do with desire, however, and instant gratification. Neptune's to do with delusion. So if someone does, you know, get chatting to them in the bar and they really seem to be the real deal, I'd see them a few times before you invest too much of your heart into it, because with Neptune in the mix, you know, and Juno, you could really kid yourself that this is a person who, you know, can really be the one, but there may be things that they're not initially showing which are important for you to know. I'm not saying it will definitely go that way, it's just possible. Equally, Mars can join in with Neptune, could bring someone into your world who really gets where you're coming from, and you can go off and do that travelling or investigation or discuss exciting concepts together in a way which is really perfect for both of you. Which brings us to Libra. Now, you, Libra, are seeing the moon in the 2nd house. For you, that is to do with the everyday finances, whereas the sun and Uranus are in the 8th house, and having Uranus there means that things that you've been invested in for some time could be quite chaotic at the moment. Also, because Saturn is in your 5th house of romance, self-expression, if you're very hard-working but you're not really getting the return on your talents, whether you work in a big organisation or you do something for yourself, that could be something that bothers you. But with Jupiter and your ruler Venus in your 7th house of relating, your natural gift to connect to others and, you know, reach into situations is really going to be strong. Mars on Neptune in the 6th house, though, suggests that your physical energy is finite for this period of time. Don't overdo it. You could end up being really exhausted. However, you do have Mercury in the 9th house, which means that your intellectual abilities can be a great asset to you, whatever you're trying to work through during this period of time. Scorpio, for you, it's all about relationships. If a relationship isn't working, you're going to really view that tie quite dimly at this time, due to the fact that Saturn is making you much more exacting in how you feel people are being in terms of the emotional side of the interaction. So it could be a grumpy boss, it could be a colleague who just always expects you to cover their shift without being too particularly appreciative or grateful. It may be that you just feel from your partner that they never really encourage you or give you any praise for the kindnesses or attention you show them. Equally, it could work in reverse. Someone may let you know that they're not happy about your way of relating. So relationship issues are certainly going to be under the astral spotlight. And also, because your sign can be about secrets, are you about to reveal something of a blockbuster to someone who up until now you've kept your cards pretty close to your chest? When you do speak and you let someone know how you feel, once you've made the decision to be much more open, You can, brutal would be a strong word, you can certainly be direct at the very least, and that's possible. But then your traditional ruler Mars is really softened by Neptune in your sector of romance. And Pluto does feed into the ascendant, the North Node and the Sun in a great way, and in a sextile to the Moon and the part of fortune. So if you're lucky enough to be in a relationship where the dialogue is clear and you have a real understanding of each other, it's not the Saturn energy that will get the upper hand. It'd be the Pluto energy that gets an upper hand, but in a very positive way. Jupiter and Venus in your sixth house also points towards maybe a new relationship is going to develop around the world of work. And with Gemini, pardon me, with Mercury in your eighth house, you may, or some Scorpios may even be thinking of self-employment or being more entrepreneurial, even if it's part-time alongside an existing role to begin with. Sagittarius, the moon for you is in the 12th house of psychology, but in the sign of Scorpio, it could be something that you've been reluctant to look at, to really face in, look it in the eye, and it may be to do with your health. I'm not saying that you're going to have anything very serious. It's more to do with, is there something that, are you working too hard, for example, and not giving yourself enough time to have rest? Are you eating what seems to be a good diet, but actually, if you really analyse it, it's probably got a lot of carbs, or a lot more carbs than it might do, because that's true of most of us. And could you get a bit more rawness in there, a bit more whole food, a bit more protein in there, in imaginative ways? There's so many sources of proteins these days. So I think just getting a bit fitter, but looking at that side of your nature which you can be quite reluctant to do, which is the stuff that hurts. Because your way of dealing with setbacks is to just dust yourself down, put on that great smile, go out and be very charismatic and just get on with it. And obviously with Jupiter, your ruler, in such a brilliant placement for the next, triggering from this event, and Venus too, then it could be a very social time for you going forwards. But Mars conjoining with Neptune is a bit of a clue in your fourth house. Look after your emotional and family situation. And Saturn being in the third, interacting with the 6th and the 12th, means that it may be your nervous system or just exhaustion that starts to creep up on you if you're not processing your emotions in an efficient way. But in terms of making your life work in as far as finances are concerned, I think you could really make some real progress over the next half year. Capricorn. Now, for you, the moon's in the 11th house of friendships, networking, your future hopes, your highest wishes. The sun's in the 5th house of your need to be an individual. Uranus has been pushing you the last few years to really be much more authentically yourself. That's not to say that you weren't being genuine before then, but maybe because you're cautious and sometimes shy, that, in safe company you may have been a bit more outrageous. But Uranus is really pushing you to be who you want to be and really not worrying so much about what other people think. And some of that could just be all the conditioning you had when you were a child, not current influences. Saturn, your ruler, however, is in the 2nd house of this event, and of course that means when you've got an 11th and 5th house energy, which can give us the push to be more sociable and spend money on keeping our wardrobe up to date and mixing and mingling and entertaining and all the rest of it, I think you're going to need to continue to be a bit cautious about the money. But if you do spend some, it could be on improving a home. That may be decoratively, it may be through some kind of renovation. And if you do, I think it would be something that you do very, very well. Communications for you, if you're a singer, a poet, a playwright, a musician, a composer, you're going to be absolutely inspired over the next half year. So that's fantastic. Now, Aquarius, the moon is in your 10th house, which can see your emotions quite close to the surface. So don't try to hide them. It's not going to work. And then on the other side of the heavens, your modern ruler Uranus, very close. Obviously, it's actually in a semi-sextile with Venus, which can be quite good. So there could be some surprising things happening around where you live or the people you meet. But the Sun and the Node together in your 4th house, I think the chances are that some kind of change to where you live, even if you don't move 1 inch down the road, it may be just the way you live in the space that you occupy. It may be that you're going to change the colour scheme, or you're going to start a new hobby or interest from home. But with Saturn T-squaring the Moon and the Sun position, if there is something for you around where you're living that's just really not working, or there are family issues and you feel really limited and throttled by these, it could really sort of feel very unfair. But your enterprising nature means that past efforts, hard work, can actually reward you. Mars can still give you a reward financially. And with Mercury in your 5th house, you can still use, and remember Mercury is exalted in your sign and governs the 2nd decan of the sign of Aquarius. So, you know, if you need to sort of be a bit playful or amusing in your inimitable, quirky way, you can do so very charismatically, which can help all these situations. But if there is something around your home or emotional life that needs to change, it may feel like everything's resisting that desire for change, but it can still happen. You may just really need to be as patient as possible. And me too. Which brings us, as ever, to Pisces. Very much last but not least. So for you, great that you've got your co-ruler of Neptune still in your sign, but it's in a conjunction with Mars. That suggests that more spiritual side of your nature can be good. Jupiter and Venus in your 2nd house, money's coming to you. And if it's not directly you winning the lottery, it could be that you're going to, you know, cash in some pensions, or someone's going to be generous to you. A business idea can do well, or you just, within the budget you've got, you're going to enjoy the good things in life. But if you're hoping to develop it or stay on a diet ready for the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, just be aware that Jupiter and Venus will test you to your very fingernails when it comes to resisting the calorific goodies. And it may be hard, but you'll have a great time. But of course, for you, the Moon's in the 9th house of expansion, spontaneity, higher knowledge, and the Sun, Node and Uranus, the 3rd house of everyday routine. The connection with siblings, neighbours, you know, using our smartphones and stuff like that. But Mercury's a bit of a clue in your 4th house. I really think that some Pisces people may be more active at home in some kind of enterprising way. Pluto's in a strong position. The big thing with this event is what has been the big thing for you for a while, which is Saturn in the 12th house. So looking after that nervous system, you know, getting plenty of early nights, drinking lots of water, you know, if you're interested in supplements and all that kind of good stuff, that could be something that you might think about too. The Saturn in the 12th house just means that the things you tend to worry about could just get under your skin a little bit. So, but good communication can inform you of lots of strategies to deal with whatever challenges, but also to embrace whatever opportunities come your way over this next half year. It's been absolutely a pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Please stay safe and goodbye for now.